Hi everyone, and welcome to the Emotion Monster demonstration. So before we get started, I wanted to just go over the supplies we're going to need today. So our Model Magic Clay, some sculpting tools. I used a palette knife, spoon, fork, and even a chopstick. If you have toothpicks, you can use those. Otherwise, I use Q-tips and scissors for that part of the demonstration. You're going to need a drawing utensil like a pencil or pen, and then your markers. So feel free to pause the video at this moment just to find your supplies, and then we'll get started. So the first part of the project is going to be the sketching portion. So all you're going to need is your piece of paper and that pencil or pen. So I'm going to be sketching some thumbnails of some ideas for my little monster sculptures. So I'm first starting off just drawing two rectangles as my frames that I'll be drawing inside of. So a helpful tip I wanted to point out when you begin your sketching is to keep your sketch very simple. So I wouldn't have a lot of intricate pieces. I would just focus on some basic forms that you can make. So for example, I kind of work off of the idea of having a large shape for the body, and then a smaller shape for the head, and then some feet and arms. And then you can add the details, like hair, ears, and any kind of texture after that. But this kind of helps me even when I'm sculpting, just to kind of focus on three main sections of the body. So I'm next going to go into my coloring phase. So I think it's important that we color these just so we have an idea of what they will look like in the end. And we can use these colors while we are sculpting today, which is very exciting. So my first emotion monster I drew, it is surprised. So when I think of surprised, I think of a warm and bright color. So I decided to use this macaroni and cheese yellow-orange color to, kind of use as my base color. I even highlighted the word, that way I remember, that key color that I'm working with. And then I, added different colors that I thought would contrast well with that bright orange. So the next figure I'm going into is my emotion monster that feels loved. So the color I feel with loved is this lime green and definitely some warm purples. So you'll see that I'll color it in using the green and the purple for this one. And now the tough decision to decide which one I will choose. And it's surprised. I thought this one was really funny looking and had some great texture details included on it. So you can see here, I liked this one the most. And now we are going to be going into the sculpting phase. So if you want to grab your Model Magic and cut the bag open, just remember that once you cut the bag open, the clay will begin to dry. So if you don't want to use all your clay in one sitting, I would go grab a Ziploc bag or some kind of container you could keep it sealed in. So for my monster, I'm going to tear my piece of clay in half. I'm just going to start off with a little bit, and then if I need more, I can grab more. So feel free to knead your clay a little bit. It's super squishy and really fun to play with. So before I start sculpting, I'm going to number, the pieces I'm going to need on my thumbnail. So I like to break up my sculpture in two main parts, so the head and then like the torso body part. So for the first part, the head, I'm going to need a smaller sphere, and then the body's going to need a bigger sphere. So a tip I like to suggest when we are first starting off with the form of our monster is to just kind of make the shape in your hands first. And it doesn't have to be super clean looking, just kind of like a rough estimate. So here I'm trying to see if the head is the right size compared to the body. So I want the head to not be the same size, just a little bit smaller. So the really wonderful thing about the Crayola Model Magic Clay is that you can color it before it's dry. So I like to first give my clay a little bit of color before I begin sculpting, just so I have like a base that I can work with. So what you can do is flatten your clay out and literally just draw on top of it, and then you're gonna knead it back and forth and you'll see the color begin to show. And if you get to a point once you mix in the color and it's not dark enough, feel free to go back in there and add more color. It's not going to get super dark, but it at least gives you a base to work with when we get to the decorating phase. So I've gotten to a point where I feel comfortable with the shapes I've made and I like the forms and I'm ready to attach them. So you have a couple different options here. You can either use toothpicks, which I think are easiest, but I didn't have any, so I decided to use some Q-tips. I decided to cut the fuzzy part off of the Q-tips, that way I can use the stick parts. I would recommend when you get to this part with the Q-tips that you have an adult help you, just because it's a little tricky to cut those end pieces off. So to attach them, you're first just going to put it into one part of the clay, so it kind of looks like a lollipop, and then you're going to stick the other piece of the clay on top, and this will allow it to have some better structure to stand up and to make sure that they stay together. The real cool thing with Model Magic Clay is that it's super sticky once it attaches to each other, but I like to get a little sculpting tool and kind of make those two shapes combine. So I was using my palette knife to just kind of pull down the clay a little bit, just so they kind of merge together more. So I've gotten to the next part of my monster, so I need to color some new white clay to match the other parts. So here I'm just making the blue parts of the monster, and then I'll be going into the green parts. Since my monster has some similar shapes throughout, as you can see in like the spikes on the head and the arms, I wanted to just duplicate those by rolling out a long snake and then counting how many I needed and then using my palette knife to chop off the pieces. So I'm going to replicate that same process I did for the arms and the spikes for the hands and then the little details on top of the spikes. So I counted how many spheres I'm going to need to make, and I realized I needed to make more blue clay, so I'm rolling out some, and then I'm cutting up some of the pieces, which I'll roll into spheres after that. Now I'm going to begin attaching my feet and then the other parts of the monster. So I decided not to use the Q-tips, but feel free to, keep using those as an attachment. But I wanted to try using the spoon as another method to attach the clay. But the clay does attach pretty easily because it is so sticky. But I just like to reinforce that just to make sure the limbs won't fall off when it's all dry. So now that we've finished, sort of the main parts of our sculpting, we're going to move on to the detailed parts. So we are going to add texture, some facial features, using our chopstick, end of a pencil, toothpick, any kind of tool you can find that'll make small details. So for me, I just wanted to imprint kind of where the features will be, and then I go back and use my clay to define it. And once you've made all your facial features, you can think about how you want to add texture. So for me, I wanted to use a plastic fork. I thought it would be kind of fun to have some polka dots on the front of the surprised monster, but feel free to use any kind of tools you have laying around your house. So that concludes the first part of our sculpting, and we will be moving on to the decorating. So you're going to need to allow your sculpture to dry for at least 24 hours before you can start adding marker on top. So if you want to pause that video and let your sculpture dry, then come back in 24 hours. Okay, and we are back, and it has been 24 hours, and we are going to go into the decorating phase. So if you want to grab your markers and get those ready. So you can see I just did a little test strip on the back of it. I wanted to kind of see what the markers would look like before I started drawing. You can see that they're really bright even on top of the colored clay, so you have a lot to work with here. I would focus on some patterns and textures you can make with the markers, or you can simply color in parts of the body. So this is your time to have fun with it, be creative. Okay, and we are getting to the end of this video now, and I just want to thank everyone for joining me during this, and I hope everyone had a wonderful time making their emotion monsters, and make sure you share this with your friends and family. Thank you!